Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm were making all kinds of headlines when they announced the Rey movie at Star Wars Celebration. I predicted at the time that the movie would never see the light of day, especially in a theater. Maybe it would go direct to Disney Plus or something like that. But then they doubled down. They actually had the director, Sharmeen Obaid, whatever her name is, to go out there and say a bunch of embarrassing things, basically reiterating to Star Wars fans why they don't like the brand right now. Then Disney went into crisis management mode and announced an impromptu Mandalorian and Grogu team-up movie, which I guess is a better idea than a Rey Palpatine movie. I don't know why anyone thought like a Rey solo movie would ever work. The character is not compelling, had one of the worst story arcs in cinematic history, told over 3 movies that were far too long. And of course, the last one actually probably should have been 5 hours just to get the amount of storytelling in Rise of Skywalker, whatever that thing was. Man, that's 2.5 hours I regret letting go of. Let's just put it that way. So it was just a bad idea from the get-go. And I do believe my initial reaction to the Rey movie, which they're claiming is going to be the new Jedi Order or something like that it will actually never see the light of day, certainly not in theaters, will prove out to be true in the long run. In fact, World of Real are reporting Daisy Ridley is set to reprise her role as Rey Skywalker in Sharmeen Obaid-Chinoy's upcoming Star Wars film. We don't know much about this movie, except for the controversial remarks its filmmaker has made, and that it might be titled New Jedi Order. So I'm usually not keen on looking for Star Wars intel, but a well-informed source is giving me additional details on the current status of the film, and that is not good news. I've been told that Disney has delayed the film indefinitely. In what world is that not good news? This is a story that probably shouldn't be told from a filmmaker that likely never should have been hired in the first place, because if you look at their biography and the actual work that they've done, they've never actually done a mainstream movie. They've never done an action movie. They've certainly never done a science fiction movie. And from what I can tell, they've never actually made a movie that isn't a documentary. Like, why would you want to give the Star Wars franchise and your next hope at revitalizing interest in a brand that Disney paid like $4.5 billion for, that's absolutely been decimated by all the terrible decisions of Kathleen Kennedy? Why would you want to further destroy Star Wars sight unseen because you hired a moron that can't shut up every time they get a mic in front of their faces? Ooh, she wants to make men uncomfortable. Well, trust me, we've been watching Star Wars since Disney acquired the brand, and it's been plenty uncomfortable for men and women. Don't worry. The mission has been accomplished by Kathleen Kennedy, and I guess the one other creative voice that she really felt like really got Star Wars, Ruin Johnson or whatever. And it's not like Rey just failed in The Force Awakens or The Last Jedi or Rise of Skywalker. They can't actually sell any toys with the character because the character was literally so boring. Not even kids can imagine having a fun adventure with the character or whatever. The reason Disney bought the Star Wars brand was to have a brand that typically appealed to a younger male audience. They've destroyed that, and also had an enormous fan base that came along with it when it came to all the stuff outside of movies. We're talking about toys and merchandise. And basically, all the stuff associated with the sequel trilogy is toxic. Nobody wants to buy any of that stuff. I've got 3 kids in between 2 years old and 8 years old, and I refuse to let them wear any merchandise or play with any toys associated with the sequel trilogy because I don't want my children to be embarrassed by having the stuff on them. It's that bad. World of Real continued. This is why they surprised everyone last week and decided to announce The Mandalorian and Grogu as the next Star Wars movie. They just don't have confidence that New Jedi Order will be happening in the near future. The problem seems to reside in creative differences between screenwriter Stephen Knight and Lucasfilm. I'm told that a draft had originally been written for the film, but Lucasfilm gave so many notes that he had to start from scratch. And now they're having to go to Mandalorian and Grogu, the 2 characters that they've actually created during the Disney Star Wars era that have some popularity still left with them. And I do think that might be stretching it quite a bit at this point. If you were going to announce a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, you should have done it 3 years ago, maybe when the characters were really popular and people still wanted to buy the toys and the little plushies of Grogu or whatever. Now that he's called Grogu instead of Baby Yoda, he's just not quite so cool. And of course, we did have The Mandalorian Season 3, as well as the Book of Boba Fett, that removed an enormous amount of shine off the Mandalorian himself. And they're basically sitting there with their dicks in their hands because they've got nothing of interest to actually film into a movie. How many years has it been at this point since we've gotten a frickin' Star Wars movie. And apparently Kathleen Kennedy and the other executives at Lucasfilm are a major reason for that. For some reason, the only filmmaker that she's worked with since she's been the president of Lucasfilm that she had any respect for or particularly liked their creative direction was Rian Johnson, the guy that basically destroyed Star Wars like in one movie. I couldn't believe it. It was basically within the first 30 minutes of The Last Jedi when I realized, wow, this thing is an enormous pile of crap. And somehow it just got worse and worse and worse as it went on. And she was going to make another trilogy with that guy. Next thing you know, the guys from Game of Thrones were going to make a trilogy. And then fucking Kevin Feige was going to make a Star Wars movie. And the dude that did Thor Love and Thunder was going to make a Star Wars movie. And everybody was going to make a Star Wars movie. But they made no Star Wars movies in 5 or 6 years because they actually killed the interest in the biggest franchise in the entire world. Bravo, Kathleen Kennedy. And doubling down on this stupid Rey announcement was just another friendly reminder. It was probably a piece of mercy on the part of Bob Iger, Kathleen Kennedy, and everyone associated with Lucasfilm. To make matters worse, there is the possibility that Knight may not be staying on board the project. His frustrations have grown. He's put Star Wars on the back burner and is now focused on the screenplay for his Peaky Blinders movie, which is supposed to go into production this fall. These issues with Knight come only 2 years after development on the film started, and various drafts have circulated with different writers, including Damon Lindelof from The Watchmen and Justin Britt Gibson, both eventually exiting this untitled Rey Skywalker movie. Knight came aboard soon after. It feels like there must be so much corporate interference on the part of Kathleen Kennedy that they really can't even get a movie through production cleanly all the way to the finish line. Remember, J.J. Abrams was not supposed to do the final installment in the sequel trilogy. It was supposed to be 3 different directors all the way through. They had a script drawn up for the third movie and everything. And then it turns out Rian Johnson had taken an enormous dump on all the stuff in the first movie. And the dude decided, I cannot continue on this. So they had to bring J.J. Abrams back as a Hail Mary to hopefully try to salvage the trilogy. That didn't work. Remember the Solo movie, the Han Solo origin story that literally nobody in the history of Star Wars ever asked for, had Lord and Miller attached to it, 2 of the more successful film creators of the past 10 years or so. They were basically at the finish line. Kathleen Kennedy said, no, I don't like this, and had to bring Ron Howard in to reshoot it and make it basically a different movie after that. Kathleen Kennedy has made so many mistakes along the way and apparently cannot get along with anybody that has a vision for Star Wars that doesn't align directly with what she's been trying to build up apparently for the past 10 years or whatever, to basically destroy the brand and turn it into a girl science fiction brand. Shockingly, this has not gone well. And so many talented writers and filmmakers have just walked out the door because apparently she is impossible to please or work with. And I'm not surprised Stephen Knight got so much feedback, so much red ink on it, that he basically had to start over. And I imagine that's probably because he tried to write a Star Wars movie, and that's not exactly what they're looking for. This has been absolutely ridiculous. One of the biggest blunders in Hollywood history, handing the keys to Lucasfilm and Star Wars over to Kathleen Kennedy, and she somehow has devalued the brand to such a degree that we're hiring documentary filmmakers from Pakistan to try and do the big Rey movie as if it was ever going to come out. And now they're just having to placate fans and use the 2 characters that people don't hate, Grogu and fucking The Mandalorian. Why is that a movie? That's a season of television. We've only seen it 2 or 3 times at this point. Now, there are some reports out there stating that it is still in production. I do not believe this, but this is what they said on Gizmodo. Well, that's not true, according to Lucasfilm. A source at the company told IO9 the report is inaccurate and Knight continues to write and be a part of the process. In fact, the company is waiting on the latest draft as you read this. You know what's weird? What they say in the Gizmodo article actually doesn't really discredit or even invalidate what World of Real is saying there. They say he's still working on it. It's just on the back burner because he had to rewrite the whole thing from scratch. And he realizes Peaky Blinders is likely going into production much sooner than this stupid Rey movie, which will literally never see the light of day in theaters anyway. If you listen to what Bob Iger has been stating, and if he's actually being honest about it, there's no way they can move forward with this project. But Gizmodo claims it's not true. Me personally, I'm putting my money on the World of Real because it's literally the only thing in the world that makes sense. Announcing the Rey movie never made sense to begin with. Doubling down and bringing the director out that has no business directing a Star Wars movie to go out there and insult your fans and tell them why they should not watch Star Wars never made sense. Announcing a Mandalorian and Baby Yoda movie When you have all this bad publicity, absolutely makes sense. And I imagine they did decide to put that one to the front of the line, hotshot the production, and hope Jon Favreau can turn a chicken salad out of chicken shit, which is basically what Kathleen Kennedy has turned Lucasfilm and Star Wars at this point. There's no way this movie gets made. Disney are going to be so gun shy after the Marvels. And believe me, if they do make a Rey Skywalker solo movie called The New Jedi Order, it will bomb worse than the Marvels at the box office. It doesn't matter if it comes out in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. People are going to remember this shit. Star Wars fans are not going to forget just how badly their franchise has been bastardized by Kathleen Kennedy and Disney. And if you would like more conversations on this, it just so happens I have a ton more content over on Patreon, more long-form stuff, and I love to have conversations about the MCU, Indiana Jones, TMNT, Star Wars, all that kind of stuff with my good friend Aaron Sparrow. We do the Geek Fix every single Wednesday on the Patreon, exclusive to there. It's a fun podcast. If you've not checked that out, there's a link in the video description, and we are certainly going to be talking about this one this week.